Today, we're diving into the 1739 Currency Act. It's a fascinating story about how one of America's founders basically figured out a way to create economic value, seemingly, out of thin air.
So here's what you really need to know. Long before the US was even a country, a young Benjamin Franklin pushed for this really radical idea, creating paper money that was backed by land, not gold. And this wasn't just some wild experiment. It was a genuine innovation that pulled a whole colonial economy back from the brink of collapse.
Welcome to the MoniLytics channel, where money meets research.
Okay, so to really get why this was such a game changer, we have to understand the problem they were facing. Back in the early 18th century, the colony of Pennsylvania was staring down a pretty severe liquidity crisis. What that means is the entire economy was just grinding to a halt. It was running out of a medium of exchange. It was running out of money.
So you have to ask, where did all the cash go? Well, if you look at the 1739 statute itself, it's pretty clear the colony had a huge trade imbalance. All the hard currency, we're talking gold and silver coins, was constantly flowing out of Pennsylvania and right back to Great Britain to pay for all the manufactured goods they were importing. This left the local economy totally starved for cash.
In today's terms, this is what we'd call a classic liquidity crisis. I mean, when there isn't enough cash to grease the wheels of commerce, everything gets incredibly difficult. Farmers can't sell their crops, artisans can't buy their materials, the whole system just seizes up.
Now, Benjamin Franklin, who at this point was a sharp economic thinker, not yet the famous statesman, he absolutely nailed the diagnosis. In a pamphlet he wrote, he pointed out that when money gets scarce, the cost of borrowing it, the interest rate, just skyrockets.
And the fallout from that was pretty dire. It actually created this vicious cycle. You see, high interest rates meant businesses couldn't really expand. The lack of buyers drove down prices for local goods. And of course, skilled workers had zero incentive to move to a place where they couldn't get paid. The whole thing just led to total stagnation.
But Franklin didn't just point out the problem. He had this really deep, theoretical grasp of what money is, and that understanding became the actual blueprint for the solution. He wasn't just the guy who printed the money, he was the intellectual architect of this whole new system.
For his time, Franklin's view of money was incredibly sophisticated. He argued it has two different kinds of value. First, there's its value as bullion, like a gold bar. Its value comes from the sheer labor it takes to get it. But second, and this was the crucial insight, as currency, it has an additional value just because of how useful it is. It saves a ton of time and effort that you'd waste in a barter system. That efficiency, he argued, is a form of value all by itself.
So how did they actually put these ideas into practice? Well, that brings us to the Currency Act of 1739, which was really this detailed, mechanical solution to a very complex problem.
And here it is, the primary source itself. The Act laid out a whole plan to inject a new kind of money into the economy, these paper bills of credit that would act as a medium of exchange.
Now, this legislation was super clever because it was designed to kill two birds with one stone. First, obviously, it would fix the liquidity crisis. But it also broke a political logjam with the colony's wealthy owners, the Penn family, who were demanding that all these overdue land taxes, or quit rents, be paid in silver, which, of course, the colony didn't have.
The Act authorized a really specific amount, 11,110 pounds and 5 shillings. But this new money wasn't just printed up and handed out. No, it was designed to be loaned into existence.
And to get rid of that political headache, the Act set aside 1,200 pounds to be paid directly to the proprietors. This was basically the price of getting them to agree to accept the new paper money for all future payments, which was absolutely essential if you wanted everyone else to accept it.
This brings us to the real heart of the whole system, the Public Loan Office. This is how these paper bills, which had no real value on their own, were made credible and stable. I mean, how do you make a piece of paper valuable? You back it with something real.
The process was actually pretty simple, but really elegant. A landowner, let's say a farmer, could go and mortgage his land to a public loan office. In return, he'd get a loan in these freshly printed bills of credit. Then, he'd pay that loan back over several years, with 5% interest. And just like that, the paper money was backed by the most important asset in the whole colony, land. But this system also had this other brilliant function. The interest they collected on all those loans, it didn't go into a private bank's pocket. It became the main source of revenue for the colonial government. It paid for salaries, for public works, and other government stuff, which meant they didn't have to levy as many direct taxes on the people. The whole thing was self-funding.
When you step back and look at the big picture, you realize this was so much more than just printing money. Franklin's system was a pretty sophisticated piece of social technology. Its value didn't come from some rare metal, it came from a mix of real collateral, public usefulness, and good old-fashioned collective trust.
And this gets to a really key economic idea called the liquidity premium. This is the extra value that money has just because everyone agrees to accept it, which makes all our transactions way more efficient. By creating a currency that people trusted and found useful, the 1739 Act didn't just add money to the economy, it unlocked this liquidity premium, which gave a boost to all economic activity.
So the value of Pennsylvania's currency really came from two things: tangible collateral, that's the land, and the public's trust in this loan office system. This is a bit different from another theory of value that Franklin also thought about, which is the idea that value really comes from the human labor it takes to produce something. And that's a whole other can of worms we're going to dive into next.
All of this leaves us with a pretty cool question to think about. If a pre-industrial colony could pull off creating stable money, backed by little more than dirt and a well-run public trust, what does that say about what truly gives our modern, much more complex currencies their value today?
If you found this research valuable, please like the video, subscribe to MoniLytics, and check out the affiliate links in the description to support the channel.
And stay tuned for our next deep dive, where we'll be shifting our focus to the labor theory of value, human effort as currency.